Good morning, everyone. I want to start by thanking Nobel Women's Initiative for inviting me here and enabling me to meet so many wonderful, powerful, passionate, strong women, the expert activists and the activist experts that we need to transform the world. This has been a really wonderful few days for me. Thank you. Now, this panel is looking at a world of non-killing. This is the world we want, free of existing and new weapons of murder, extrajudicial execution, and mass suffering. A world free of male violence against women and children, free of militarism, free of war. My name's Rebecca Johnson, as we heard, and I've developed from having initially studied nuclear physics to ending up living 5 years outside a US nuclear base, and then turning those experiences into something that I could take forward and indeed have taken forward with many of you. Now, we will start off on this panel with the legacy of the Second World War that I've spent a lot of my life working on, a legacy of the Cold War. And if, to paraphrase a US general from the 80s, if we dummies let it, we'll keep being deployed and modernized until by accident, human error, or intention, it plunges us into the third and the last World War, a nuclear war that destroys us all, causing nuclear winter and global famine. Obviously, nuclear weapons is going to be what I introduce. And then the panel will go on to look at, from quite different perspectives, dealing with the weapons, the tools devised, designed, built, and deployed to provide more and more remote and deadly ways to kill, to murder, with things like the robot killing weapons. And also threats to overturn national legislation, where very rare national legislation in the world, to constrain militarism in Japan, and the ideas also developed here in Ireland from the experience in Ireland for resolving conflict through power sharing and consensus voting. Well, what's the link? Well, I think we would understand it when we know that Mairead had a great hand in making this panel possible, because the link clearly is the war and it's war, conflict, and their killing machines, and also decision-making and our own personal responsibility, all of us in our own countries and as world citizens, to bring about the world of non-killing that we want to see. So I'm going to start off as the first panelist, and so I've asked Nancy to make sure that I keep to time. And if you look out of your window here, you see a scene that looks almost like this, but without the Trident nuclear weapons in it. This is the loch in Scotland, the Gairloch, where the British Trident nuclear weapons are deployed. And it is as beautiful as what you see out of your window, and about the same size. Villages, people living on the other side. I took that photo. You see how close I got to it. This was during Faslane 365, when we attempted to get, I think we actually succeeded that time, Mairead, in getting Mairead and Anne and a number of other people here arrested. But we were getting thousands, and of course, we weren't getting anyone. They were getting themselves to Faslane. We had people from Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Faslane to protest against the modernization of British nuclear weapons at a time when everybody was saying, get rid of them. Let's just pause a minute and remember what we're talking about. This isn't just a submarine. This is a submarine loaded with weapons, and this is what they do. They create this over cities, and this is the result. This is the picture of Nagasaki, directly after the August 9th, 1945 bombing. And you can just see some steps here. These were two trees at a shrine in Nagasaki. Normally you can't see the mountains. Nagasaki and Hiroshima were utterly destroyed by 2 small bombs. And this is the human consequence of those bombs. These were the survivors. And many of them didn't survive very long because of the effects of that bombing. And we don't have time to go into a lot of detail. I just want to show you and remind you, because this is another consequence of Trident, of the nuclear weapons in the arsenals of just 9 countries in the world. Just 9. Less than 5% of the world's nations have nuclear weapons. We turn it into sounding like it's a problem about Iran. Actually, Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. Iran might be trying to get a nuclear option, and we have to think why we have created a world where a country even wants to do that. But 9 countries do have nuclear weapons, and Britain is one of them, the US, Russia, China, France, India, Pakistan, Israel, and very recently North Korea. Those are the 9 that we have to get rid of the nuclear weapons from. Africa, this is a starving child in Africa. I was doing this presentation at a meeting, actually in Israel, and a French participant got up and said, well, I'm really shocked that you're showing starving child in Africa when you're talking about nuclear weapons. What's it got to do with them? He thought I was making an emotive point. Yes, I'm making a very emotive point. I'm making a very rational point too. Because if those 9 countries use their nuclear weapons, then it will, if you use nuclear weapons on cities, and that's frankly what they're designed to do, you turn those cities into rubble, into dust, and the dust goes into the atmosphere, and the atmosphere gets clouded over with the dust of thousands and thousands and thousands of homes, factories, buildings, people, and all the things we have in our homes. And it causes abrupt cooling. It causes complete change in temperature, lowering of temperature, and change in rainfall. And this results in the collapse of agriculture around the world. Studies have looked at Chinese agriculture, American agriculture. We've got a study now looking at Africa. But the collapse in agriculture means people starve. And the people in the most vulnerable situation in the world starve first, because that's the way it works. And Africa and Latin America and quite a lot of Asia, in fact the whole southern hemisphere, are actually nuclear weapon-free zones. Their people would starve in their millions, up to 1 billion is the calculation from scientists, if those 9 countries use nuclear weapons. And I'm not talking about all their nuclear weapons. I am talking about half of the explosive power carried on one Trident submarine. I'm talking about half of what India and Pakistan, 2 of the newest nuclear-armed nations, have. 100 of the Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons would cause this global nuclear winter and global famine, and it would last for at least 10 years. Think how many people would die of starvation. Think how many people would become displaced. Think of, it would destroy so much. I was telling all the other speakers, speak slowly. Thank you for the reminder. It would destroy so much of what we hold dear. So we have to deal with it, but we have to stop just asking the nuclear-armed states to get rid of theirs. They reduce, they rationalize since the end of the Cold War. But the countries that have to be woken up to see that this is their security interest, and the people, we have to remind ourselves, this is our security interest, to get rid of nuclear weapons. Internationally, we've now put together an international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. ICAN. And let's face it, you know, we took the idea from ICBL, from Jody. And this was a revelation for me, because I've been for the last 15 years working with the existing treaties, the arms control, the non-proliferation. I have, physics and all of this. I can talk about verification. We got stuck in the technicalities of it, in the technicalities of the incremental reduction of an arsenal. We still have 17,300 nuclear weapons in the world, 25 years after the Cold War ended, or 20 years at least. And then I just realized it's actually very simple. These weapons are inhumane. They are weapons of mass suffering. They would cause catastrophic humanitarian harm if ever used on one city or on several. They would destroy and cause catastrophic humanitarian harm. It's really very simple. They must be banned. They must be prohibited. And this is really the very simple message from ICANN. We're not getting stuck in the details. Let the nuclear-armed states work out the details of how they're going to eliminate and verify, because that's their problem, actually. Our problem is that they carry on modernizing. They carry on adding to their arsenals. You get a small reduction in, I'll slow down again, sorry, in US-Russia arsenals, a small reduction, and they pump $85 million into the US, and I'm sure into the Russian nuclear laboratories. Britain is getting the next generation. And sure, it'll get a little bit fewer, maybe 3 nuclear-armed submarines. So what? We have to stop the lot. And the only way to do that is by banning. And the only way to ban them, so I'm not yet ready for that one, and the only way is to recognize they threaten our survival, but also, sisters, they steal our resources from the rest of our security. We want to deal with climate change. A fraction of the money that's going into dealing with climate change is going into the nuclear weapons. Clean water, all of these are our real security needs. And nuclear weapons are stealing attention and resources from that. Now, I was asked by Liz, this one's for Liz, because she wanted me to remind you all, it can be done. We can ban nuclear weapons. This was 36 of us dancing on the top of the nuclear weapons silo at Greenham Common on New Year's Day, 1983. I was one of those women, and by the way, there are other Greenham women in this room now. And this is the silos after they got rid of the weapons. They had to keep the silo for verification. But look, a rare breed of Exmoor ponies and people walking their dogs. 6 years between us setting up the Women's Peace Camp and the treaty that banned them. And then a few more years to actually get rid of the Americans out of the base and so on. But it can be done. People power, women power. But people power really works. And this shows it. And so this is what ICANN is doing. Work locally, but work in non-nuclear countries. ICANN has campaigners in so many different countries, also in Latin America. We build on ICBL, the cluster munitions, the human rights, the amnesty groups, because we're not asking you to stop what you're doing and do everything here. We're asking you to give a fragment of what you're doing when you're mobilizing, to remind your non-nuclear governments, in particular, to get on the train to ban nuclear weapons. That's all. I don't have time to talk about the local actions, but I know that Mairead and Anne and other activists here are going to get groups together to come to Aldermaston and help us actually stop that new nuclear weapon system being deployed into Britain. Thank you very much. And so now I take off my speaker role, and I'd like to invite my next panelist. We're going to hear from Yoshioka Tatsuya-san, who co-founded the wonderful peace boat that I know some of you are going to be visiting, which is right now passing. Okay. Thank you, Yasna, for letting us know this. Haven't they timed that well?
Thank you very much. Yeah, so it is really honored to share this opportunity that our ship is Peace Boat is going. So, and thank you so much again, all of you. You give us the presentation this time, and also to share this moment of the ship is coming. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, but I have to report to you the little bit pessimistic the report, because now Japan is really facing the very militaristic and nationalistic atmosphere, very, very strong. And this is Article 9. Basically, this is one of the most peaceful constitutions in the world so far. And renounce a war, of course. But at the same time, theoretically, this constitution renounces military itself. They don't accept any kind of the military. Of course, Japan has, under the pressure of the United States. And this constitution, why it happened, is this is deeply related with how Japan committed the terrible war crime and invasion in the past. And Okay, sorry. And also Hiroshima, Nagasaki, of course. So, and this is not only Japanese constitution. That is my point of view. That is all lives they suffered during World War II. I think that's why I'm saying that this is an asset of the human beings. So, and this is of course and contribute the nuclear weapon abolition. And also, of course, that is a non-military resolution. And of course, that is to try to, this is one of the quite serious situations, is the United States is really try to integrate Japanese military for their global tactics. And you can remember very easily, in the Iraqi war, without the support from the Japan and the UK, I think Bush has a quite the serious problem. And but Tony Blair and the Japanese Koizumi, they supported. That's why such kind of tragedy happened in Iraq. So I think this is very important, not to cooperate with the militaristic, the global tactics of the United States, the military. Anyway, so this is I'm really feel shame that I have to introduce this kind of picture. But now, this is a reality. And including the young people, they start to participate, anti-Chinese, anti-Koreans, and sentiment. And also abolish the Article 9. And their understanding is that this is a punishment to Japanese by the international society. And I think really we have to think the shift. I really would like to appeal to the Japanese people. We have to change the idea, no, this is not a punishment. This is a treasure. This is a really key for to abolish the war. It is one of very strong my message. Look at this one. This is new prime minister. This is not 60 years ago. Now, and we have the number 4, the military in the world. But this Article 9 is really try to bind, not to activate about that military power. They have the weapons, but they are calling that a special plane or special car, or they don't say the tank or the fighter, or they didn't say that. So, but if become the national, now the name is the Japanese Defense Force, but that the Prime Minister Abe would like to change to the National Army. And it is a totally different, So, and in Asia, maybe you know that the North Korea situation also very critical, and also territorial issue is a very facing the danger. I'm really personally, I believe there is a high possibility to start a war. Really, the armed conflict in this region. But if that happens in this region, of course, this is become the worldwide. So we really try to make efforts, the Article 9, try to protect this Article 9. And this is our activities, but very unfortunately, the situation is not easy. Really, seriously, now the Japanese sentiment is becoming nationalistic. We really, thanks to the Jody and Milet, they supported at the global conference 4 years ago. And that it was a really big support. And at that time, we stopped to change this Article 9, really. And at that time, also Prime Minister was the same Abe. But he come back now. And now he tried to change again, and we are facing a very serious situation. I think, of course, that's this is not the only Japanese issue or Asian issue. This is a global issue. That's I really would like to emphasize, because Judy already mentioned about the UN Charter 26 is clearly saying reduce the military and increase the development of welfareness. That's a key. And I think this peace constitution have the very strong power to convince the people toward that way. And of course, and Ban Ki-moon said that only 1 month the budget is the year budget for the development. And that's really exactly, that's statistics also show us. So, and that's why we also involve as a peace boat. That ship has this kind of sign, the no poverty, end poverty, and also peace is, we also combine about that. So, anyway, I think that's, I really would like to appeal to you. They passed this, the brochure, and as an international movement, that we would like to support this Article 9, but not only that, to spread about the peace constitution for the military expenditure, shift to the sustainable development, and for the end of the poverty. Yeah, and at the end, I would like to add one thing also, that is the Fukushima nuclear power plant issue. This is not the separate issue from the nuclear weapon. This is deeply related, because that the plutonium, this nuclear power plant is to produce the plutonium for the material of the nuclear weapon. And Japan has the enough amount of the plutonium now, and at the same time, missile technology we have. If this is also hidden agenda of the Japanese government, right-wing people, is that they would like to have the nuclear weapon. Really, this is serious. Already minister level people saying that. What happens if Japan has a nuclear weapon? I think that impact is very big because we have the Hiroshima, Nagasaki, right? The people who suffered Hiroshima, Nagasaki to have the nuclear weapon. Is such kind of the negative impact to the world to promote the nuclear armed. I really cannot accept about that. So that one. And at the end, I would like to introduce this picture. This is in Fukushima. In a daily basis, the children and women, and especially pregnancy women, is suffering. And the Japanese government not support. They run away from there because of the economy. Look, this white man is protected completely. And why? Kids is yeah, I think really this picture is unacceptable. But this again, ongoing in Fukushima. And this is a so-called second economic powers country's reality. Please think about that. Nuclear weapon and a nuclear power plants is very linked. That industry is together. And creating the human rights violation again and again. And Fukushima is one of the very symbol. I think at the end, I really would like to appeal that Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Fukushima is really, I would like to share that experience together with the international society, and I really would like to appeal. First, that's to protect Article 9 and spread the peace constitution and abolish war, and of course, abolish nuclear weapon and the nuclear power plants also. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I really hope that please join the signature of the Article 9, Global Article 9 campaign. You can see the detail here. Thank you.
Arigatou gozaimashita, Yoshioka-san. So next we will hear from Peter Emerson, who's worked with the Peace People, I think has worked with Mairead and others for many, many years, and Irish CND, I hear, and also chairs the Borda Institute, or directs chairs. And he will present some ideas for resolving conflicts through power sharing and consensus voting.
First of all, a word of warning, there's a ship out there without a captain on it. Democracy is for everybody, men and women, black and white, everybody. Therefore, the democratic process should be a win-win process. It should be like mediation, relying on open questions. Unfortunately, it relies on closed questions, majority voting. Initially, in ancient Greece, there were no political parties. And citizens, no women, I'm afraid, and no slaves either, but they would go down to the forum, and today you vote with your neighbor, and tomorrow you vote against, and it all seemed to work fairly well, until, that is, you get more than two options on the agenda. which is what should happen on any contentious issue in any modern society. Now, the theorists, they spoke about the will of the people and public opinion and all that sort of thing. And they knew that you can't get unanimity very often. So they said, okay, well, we go for the greater good of the greater number, majority rule. So far, so good. Then they made a huge mistake. There are lots of ways of identifying the majority opinion of the majority will. But they chose the worst one of all, majority voting, hence majority rule by majority vote, majoritarianism. But majority voting is the most inaccurate measure of collective opinion ever invented. Secondly, it is always adversarial, yes or no, for or against. Thirdly, you cannot identify the will of the people if lots of people are only saying no. They're not saying what they want, they're saying what they don't want. You can't even identify the will of the majority. What happens in many cases is that you identify the will only of those who wrote the question, which is why majority voting has been used by many dictators, Napoleon, Lenin, Hitler, Mussolini, Khomeini, Duvalier, etc. Some of them have changed their electoral systems, some of them have changed their party systems, none of them have changed the decision-making process, majority voting, because it is the perfect tool by which you can manipulate others. And it is not only the dictators who use majority voting. If you take the United Nations Security Council in 2002 debating Iraq, and it was a very complicated question, we all know that, but there was only one resolution on the table. And France did not like the expression serious consequences. And yet, when it came to the vote, majority vote, yes or no, they voted in favor. So they voted in favor of something that they did not like. That majority opinion of the UN Security Council was not a measure of the unanimity. What we do know, however, is that it was a cause of war. So what could have happened? Well, you could have had the UK and the USA producing their draft resolution, and you call that option A. France and Germany don't like one little bit, so they change that little bit, but they present a complete package, option B. Ireland was a member at the time, and supposedly a neutral country, option C. Syria, in happier times, might have wanted option D, and you then have a debate. Everything is on the table. You can ask questions, seek clarifications, propose amendments, do whatever you like. And at the end of the day, if there's only one resolution on the table and on the computer screen, then okay, that's it. What is more likely, however, is that you have a number of options, so you then vote and you cast your preferences, and you then identify that option which has the highest average preference. So you can actually say what is the degree of unanimity. It's much more accurate. This methodology was invented over 500 years ago in 1435. Unfortunately, in the West, especially in the West, there is an obsession with majority voting. It has produced countless disasters. Despite all of these horrors, it is very difficult to persuade the media or academia, let alone politicians, to even discuss multi-option decision-making processes. I hope you can persuade them to change their minds.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's some food for thought. And now I'd like to invite Jody Williams to come up. Jody, of course, no introduction required, Nobel Laureate for her work on banning landmines, together with the ICBL. And she's going to talk to us about the newly launched campaign to ban killer robots and pull some of the common themes together. Over to you, Jody. Thank you very much.
A couple of years ago, when I was doing some research for an article blasting CIA, U.S. mercenary groups, and U.S. military use of drones in murder, targeted killing, as the U.S. likes to call it, because it sounds less offensive. In my research, I came upon the fact that the US and a handful of other countries are involved in research and development of weapons that terrify me more than drones. Now, drones are terrifying. They're morally and ethically reprehensible, in my view. I won't even say all the things that many of us already believe. But when I came upon the fact that these countries were doing research on machines that on their own can make decisions to kill human beings, I was totally freaked out. And I grew up in the duck and cover generation of the 50s, curling up under my desk in grade school to practice how we would try to save ourselves from nuclear attack. Hilarious. A bunch of kids rolled in balls under their desks are going to stop a nuclear bomb from killing them if it drops on top of them. Those exercises were exercises in terror, quite frankly. I grew up, I think, with a fundamental distrust of people who think weapons are for defense. Weapons are not for defense, they really are for war. So when I learned about the fact that people are honestly trying to create machines for air, land, and sea that once built and programmed will be able to sally forth on their own and kill you. The depths of moral depravity in that construct just horrifies me. And when I talk about killer robots with people, of course, the first response is, oh yeah, drones. Yeah, we don't like drones either, but we are trying to preemptively ban, meaning ban them before they ever are put in the battlefield, preemptively ban killer robots. It has been done before. There is a precedent in 1995. The Arms Division of Human Rights Watch and the International Committee of the Red Cross banned blinding laser weapons before they were deployed. It can be done. So we set about chatting with other NGOs, just like we did when we created the landmine campaign and others created the campaign to ban cluster munitions, which were banned in 2008. ICANN. We started talking to NGOs to get them to become involved in starting a new campaign to stop killer robots before we ever have to try to stop them on the battlefield. I'm very pleased to say we launched the campaign in London on the 22nd and 23rd of April, and as I was pondering it, it actually was 20 years, almost to the day, after we had held a similar NGO conference on landmines, the first, in London. Purely coincidental. So we're pondering, does that mean every 20 years we can ban a new weapon? I don't know. Well, my husband, Steve Goose, who was very much involved in the cluster munitions, he said, you got it wrong, honey. It was landmines, 10 years later it was cluster munitions, now we're looking at killer robots, and we're robustly attacking nuclear weapons. So it can be done. And it is following the model that we have all seen that works. Civil society coming together in common cause to ban a weapon that we believe should not exist. The model has proved tremendously effective in weapons. It has in fact spawned a whole new conception of disarmament and arms control, which is humanitarian disarmament, meaning that it's not just disarming because we should disarm, it's that we actually have to factor in humans. Yeah, I know, that collateral damage. We have to factor in the collateral damage before we commit it. We have to factor in what happens to people when we are talking about disarmament. It is not an esoteric exercise in the halls of Geneva by men in suits looking at the beautiful Alps. We are forcing them to recognize that weapons crush humanity, and they have to deal with it because we will not let them walk away from it anymore. They hate it. Even back when we were making some progress in the US on a moratorium on the export of landmines, a moratorium on use. Then Secretary of the Army General Gordon Sullivan sent a letter to Senator Patrick Leahy from the great state of Vermont, my own, woohoo, and yours now, Valerie, saying to him very clearly, Senator Leahy, if you proceed along this path and ban anti-personnel landmines, you will put weapons systems available to the US military at risk due to humanitarian concerns. That was back in 1995, and yes, we have done that. We have injected humans into the discussion about weapons, and who are these? I always love to refer to them this way, as fat white men in the so-called arms industry, which is really a killing industry. Who are these people to sit in rarefied environment deciding what weapons will be used to defend us? And we don't even know about it. That's democracy. I'm very confused these days about what democracy is anyway. But certainly a bunch of people stealing taxpayers' dollars to build the weapons that get them off in their male testosterone haze. Sorry, as somebody was saying, we gotta move through that haze and remind them that we don't like what they're doing. And they weren't elected to do this. Who elected these people to do these weapons? And I want to just end by pointing out that it's a revolving door between the Pentagon and the so-called defense industry. It's the war industry. Let's go back to what it really is. There's a revolving door. Military complete their, 20 years or whatever, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, and they get their pension. But then they go and they work for the war industry to promote the weapons. It's, and they already know all the Congress people because they've been pontificating about defending America when they're really talking about invading everybody else. And they just, amongst themselves, create new weapons and wrap it in the flag and call it defense. And it's time we do not accept that. And in my view, part of the work of the campaign to stop killer robots is to address this issue front on. Front on. I believe that if we are able to get citizen involvement on the level we did on landmines, it will have to change the discourse on militarism and war. That we are so depraved that we are actually contemplating what the US loves to call the bloodless battlefield. And it's bloodless because US soldiers will not have to die. But all the people being whacked will indeed be bloodied. We have to not allow them to use our boys, now we have to add the girls, saving our, they're no longer called soldiers either, they're what are they called these days? War fighters. Saving our war fighters. If we have killer robots out there killing, we're saving our war fighters. That is not about caring about the soldiers. If we cared about them, we wouldn't bring them home and ignore them. that is designed to stop conversation about killer robots, about nuclear weapons, about all of the other ingenious ideas that they have for making themselves more powerful and being able to project primarily the US military, but they're not alone in this. Israel already has robotic border guards. They still have humans in the loop, as they put it, but they can be turned into automatic killing machines. South Korea has them on the border with North Korea. The UK, the lovely UK, who always is in bed with the US on weapons. They're fornicating together to create to birth a new weapon of killer robots. And we have to stop it. And we have to stop it partly by enough already. And you were not elected to do this. And the pompous senators and House people on the Armed Services Committee who are given massive campaign contributions by Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Textron, Halliburton, of course, run by Mr. Cheney, the war criminal, whose company made billions of dollars off the invasion of Iraq. Enough already. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. That was brilliant. And just to remind you, actually, there's 2 US military arms companies, Lockheed Martin and Jacobs, are part of the privatized management of Britain's nuclear weapons. Our nuclear weapons down at Aldermaston, the research, the design, the manufacture, is privatized. Can you believe how ridiculous that is? I'd now like to invite my panel to come up to take places and move your chairs back because there won't be more PowerPoints here. And now is your chance. We have about 15 minutes, and I'd like to invite any of you, if you've got questions or comments that you'd like to make, please go ahead. And I get to sit down here now. So we have some women with microphones here. So the first question is here. And if your question is directed to a specific panelist, please say, but given that we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to take all the questions together and then allow the panel to respond at the end and make any closing remarks they want to make. Can you say your name as well so we all know who?
My name is Christine Jones. One of the issues that the anti-war movement in Canada is really working with is the concept of peace and prosperity, not war and austerity. And I wanted to, put it to all of the panelists, because I do think it has a lot to do as well with processes of decision-making among movements, on how we decide what our strategy for targeting specific things are going to be. But I really wanted to ask, and I think it's relevant with the G8 coming to town as well, how we collectively start addressing in a serious way this false austerity that's being forced on us when we know by just looking at things like PNAC and our own other government's information that in the billions and trillions the money is being redirected towards militarism, policing, criminalization, jailing in ways we've never seen before. So how do we confront these legal systems that we keep saying we want to work with when all they want to do is criminalize us and imprison us under the name of saving money?
Thank you very much, Christine. Question from over here. Is it going to be in English or Iranian? So, can you
sorry,
put
I prefer asking Persian.
Yeah, so can you put your headphones on so we can hear the question? Thank you. Go ahead. Say your name first.
همونطوری که شما اشاره کردین در واقع هیچ کس نمیدونه که دولت ایران دسترسی به بمب هسته‌ای پیدا کرده یا نه. اون چیزی که گفته میشه این هست که ایران نداره این موضوع رو، ولی تأکید دولت ایران بر داشتن انرژی هسته‌ای همیشه با یک توجیه اقتصادی در واقع همراه هست. اونها میگن که داشتن انرژی هسته‌ای حق مسلم مردمه. و برای اینکه در واقع مخالفان این مسئله یا مثلا کسانی که طرفدار صلح هستن بتونن با مردم در مورد این مسئله صحبت بکنن، باید براش توجیه اقتصادی داشته باشن. من از شما میخوام که تو این زمینه به ما راهنمایی بدین. آیا واقعا داشتن انرژی هسته‌ای برای کشورها توجیه اقتصادی داره؟ خیلی ممنون.
Thank you very much. Do I see some other questions? Okay, I probably have time. I see Anne, and I would have time for one more. Okay, so those two, and then we'll come back to the panel, and then we'll close. So Anne, go ahead,
Anne
please.
Patterson. It's just a quick question to Jody. I've went on the website with the killer robots, and I've tried to explain to people about killer robots. I am an absolute technic nerd. I have no idea what goes on in that technical world. I can't understand, Jody, how these robots know what to do.
Yeah.
Could you just maybe clarify that, the difference between the drone and the robot, in a way that somebody as simple-minded as me can understand?
Thanks. And over here, the microphone for down here, the front table, please. Oh, I think we've got time. The questioners have been very, very quick. Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Sami Ahmed. I come from Sudan. I have a comment and a question that I think there's great disconnect between the global nonviolent peace movement and what's in our part of the world. Certainly in my country, they are more active for conflict, violence. It's really violent conflict right now. And my question is with regard to the nuclear waste, because you talking about, I also felt a kind of, people are feeling the threat of the nuclear benefits that turned, in the other way in Japan, and I don't know, the expectation of wars. But in our part of the world, we get the waste of these 9 countries, and nobody talks about it, and we feel it's a kind of new colonialism as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And because all the questioners have been really commendably brief, since I saw another hand here that really wanted to ask a question, please go ahead.
Mi pregunta es para Yoshioka y también para Jody. Como la lucha por los derechos humanos, la lucha también por el medio ambiente, está ligado a la paz y también a la lucha contra el militarismo. Entonces, ¿cómo han sentido ustedes en sus países, principalmente Estados Unidos y Japón han sido promotores? También no de la paz sino de la guerra? Entonces, ¿cómo han sentido el respaldo de su propia gente para toda esta lucha que es tan importante para la humanidad?
Thank you very much. These are great questions. Thank you all for those. I'm going to take the panel in reverse order. So, Jody, you get to go first.
Oh, you're a doll. Thank you, darling.
I know you love me.
I do love you. With regard to the brilliant question of the brilliant activist Anne, if you call yourself simple one more time, I'm going to peacefully slap you. I assume most of us know how drones work. They can fly semi-autonomously for thousands and thousands of miles. However, when they are hovering over targets, a person is sitting somewhere, many of them in Creech Air Force Base in the desert of Nevada, watching a monitor. And when they decide that the target is a justified target, in countries we're not at war with, like Yemen, Somalia, Mali, Indonesia, just the few I can think of at the moment, Pakistan, of course, they push buttons like a joystick, like a computer game, and fire hellfire missiles and blast the people to smithereens. horrifying, dehumanizing war further. The only good thing, if there is one, is that there is still a human being determining that it's a viable target. Killer robots, which will not be allowed to exist if we have our way, even though they keep telling us it is inevitable. It's inevitable only if we sit on our ass and do nothing. Killer robots will not have that human. The killer robots in the air, on the land, and in the sea will be built. Some computer program will be put into their little computer chip brain, and then they will sally forth to kill according to however they were programmed. Of course, the proponents say, oh, how fabulous, they'll be more precise, we don't have to feed them, they're eternally vigilant, they don't have emotions that will confuse them in the fog of war, neither do they have compassion or empathy. For example, in Tahrir Square, if you had killer robots responding on behalf of the Mubarak regime dictatorship, they would be programmed to kill and they would kill, period. Unlike soldiers who made the decision to lift their guns and not kill fellow Egyptians. Once a killer robot is programmed, that machine will kill, period. How in the kinds of conflicts that we see today would a killer robot determine the difference between a woman in a burqa and a man in long flowing robes with his head wrap? How would they make the determination which is a legitimate target to murder and which isn't? Accountability. A robot runs amok because he's been hacked into. They aren't even talking about that part. They can be spoofed, they can be hacked. So the robot runs amok and he kills a village. Who's responsible? Certainly not the robot. Oh, sure, it'd be amusing to take him to court, and then what? Is it the chain of command, the commander of the robot battalion? Is it the industry that built it? Is it the cretin who designed it? Is it the individual who programmed it? As a patriot to defend us. There's no accountability. I forgot to mention that right now, as we are talking about them, there is a discussion in the Human Rights Council. There was a report released by Christoph Heinz, who is the new Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Execution. And the report is specifically on killer robots, and his report calls for an immediate moratorium on these weapons as we move toward an international agreement. Yay! Just colonialism, absolutely. The US does the same in communities in the US, of course. I mean, we put chemical waste, we put weapons waste in poor communities. It's despicable and horrifying. Are we supported by our people in the US? I'm not exactly considered popular in the US, I have to say. I assume you aren't in Japan either. I mean, grassroots activists like me, but no government of the US has ever liked me, and I'm blackballed by the New York Times and the Washington Post. I cannot get an opinion piece in either of those newspapers because my message is too radical for them to handle. So, the good people who share our vision, of course, support. Those in power don't like me in the least, and I'm happy about that. Because if they liked me, something would be fucked up.
And on that note,
And on that note,
Jody, I'll give the floor to Peter.
Okay, I'll respond to two questions, if I may. Christina Jones, you spoke about decision-making and legal systems. I actually think the fault lies, to a large extent, with the lawyers, and they're fairly used to courts of law, and people are either guilty or not guilty, and they are firmly convinced of the dichotomous way of life, if you like, here in Europe. But if you go to Africa, they had a different way of looking at things when people were in conflict with each other. And words like baraza and gachacha and judie, palabre. And they worked on the basis that initially, anyway, both people are right. And we have so much to learn from Sudan, for example. And yet we have imposed, not only nuclear waste, but our system of decision-making, the balkanization of the referendum idea on plebiscites, on self-determination and so on. I think it's a crazy thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yoshioka-san.
Thank you. First of all, I really would like to answer that nuclear waste issue and also the nuclear decolonization. I think that's really, really true. I think that's this time is through the Fukushima accident. We really start to learn that this is not just an energy issue. This is a structurally they are using that the colonialistic the mind. So that's why they don't care the kids in Fukushima, because that is not Tokyo. So, and this is, I think that's generalized to the world. And of course, in Hibakusha, atomic bomb, the victims is not only Hiroshima, Nagasaki, of course. And so that is Mururoa and the Marshall Islands and Australia, Aborigine people and so on. I think something like now, the time, together with the anti-nuclear the weapon movement, the anti-nuclear power plants movement, they also together and they organize some kind of the global Hibakusha, the atomic bomb victims, the solidarity movement. This is a very universal the issue, and also we have to together to change this colonialistic and imperialistic system itself. That is really I feel that's a necessity about that issue. And also Rosalina pointed out about the humanities issue and also human rights issue. And that is also now related with that situation in Japan now, that the nationalistic and the militaristic situation. That is one of the second biggest city, the Osaka, and the mayor of this Osaka, and start to justify the sex slavery during the war. Maybe some of you knew about that. Japan organized sex slavery during World War II for the Korean ladies and also the Chinese ladies and Filipino and so on. So, and that is a war crime, clearly. But now, one of the major city of the mayor in Japan is trying to justify about that. That is necessary. Can you imagine that? I really cannot, as a Japanese, really deeply feel shame about that he's saying. And we really against about that. But that is, I think also universally, we have to really against that kind of the, conscious. The war is a, special situation, extreme situation. We need such kind of the rest. He said rest. I'm really I really would like to start a campaign in Japan that but really it should be globally, I believe. So and I think that's in what's happened in Guatemala also exactly we can work together. This is directly and this is related with justify about the past war and militarization future. It is all linked. So that I really believe that we have to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yoshioka-san. And the women.
Nobody answered the Iranian.
I'm coming back to it, yeah, because I was also a panelist. And the women forced into the sexual slavery in Japan were called comfort women. Yeah. The day-to-day rape, they were labeled comfort women, just like nuclear weapons are labeled peacekeepers or deterrents or insurance policies. to take the mind away from the brutal reality of what's really going on. And this is the connection. I'll start by answering the Iranian question, and hopefully we can talk a bit more in depth, and then go on to just draw some final points together. But we have to understand nuclear weapons are a major currency of power and currency of power projection in the world today, mainly driven by the fact that the 5 first nuclear-armed countries are also the permanent members of the Security Council. And the treaties currently in existence on nuclear weapons appear, they don't actually do this, but they appear to say it's okay for those 5, as long as they pretend they're doing disarmament. And then if you stay out of those treaties, it's okay for you too. So you can do a nuclear deal with India, staying out, or reinforce Israel. Thank you. And so it's very, so both sides in the Iranian debate, the Western that accuse Iran and also impose sanctions against Iran on the basis of the accusation of that they're planning nuclear weapons, and also the Iranian government, both sides are being profoundly dishonest about this issue. We have to be very clear. That Iran keeps saying that what they want to do is what Japan has done, and here's a connection, because what they want to do is get the entire nuclear fuel cycle from the uranium to the plutonium, pretending that they're doing this for nuclear energy, but to give themselves an option. That's exactly how North Korea did it. By the way, it's exactly how Britain and France and China did it too, and India and Pakistan. So let's be clear, the nuclear power is the route to nuclear weapons. And and that is why the world is very worried that Iran wants nuclear power, because they can't understand why on earth would anyone want nuclear power. It's not economic, it's dirty. It creates this revolting waste that ends up being shipped to other countries like South Sudan that we cannot deal with. There's no rational reason. We have other ways to produce energy that are sustainable and a whole lot cleaner than the tar sands and the fracking and the nuclear energy. We have to change our way of thinking about energy. So basically, Iran does not have nuclear weapons, but it is building every part of a nuclear fuel cycle because it almost certainly wants people to believe that it could have. And that's the major part of the problem. Now, my final remarks, I just want to link some of these up because I started with nuclear weapons on this panel. This is a 20th century technology produced for 19th century nationalistic wars that could hold humanity, that could destroy, could end humanity in the 21st century. But at the same time, the military actually don't like it much. The politicians love it, or the politicians in certain countries love it because of the power connection. So we have to take that value away. We have to delegitimize it. I don't want anyone ever calling a nuclear weapon a nuclear deterrent. It's not, it's a weapon. But, and I actually believe that it raised the bar of the murder that was possible in war so high that nothing else seems quite as bad. Not chemical weapons, toxic weapons, phosphorus weapons, rape, all these drones, all these other horrendous, and by the way, drones and killer robots, the very first remote-controlled killing was, of course, nuclear, and that's the big mass destructive, but the technology then developed further for these. These are so connected. But if we ban nuclear weapons, we do two kinds of things. One, we say this is utterly unacceptable. We take away this option for war. And in doing that, we also reassert that humans have to be at the forefront. And this goes to this question of austerity. Nuclear weapons aren't usable, but they could go off by accident or intent But the point is, they steal resources and attention from all the things we have to do because they keep nations war-fighting, threatening each other, and because they're not usable, the military technologists keep trying to design the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. So by banning nuclear weapons, we kind of call a halt to the incredible stupidity of weapons for war. And in doing that, we redirect their attention to security that can only be dealt with cooperatively among peoples and nations. We cannot deal with climate destruction with weapons, although they might try to use weapons when there are displaced communities as a result of climate destruction. We cannot deal with the conflicts that are going on through weapons, not Syria, we can't add weapons to a conflict. We have to deal with the causes of the conflict and try to change our decision-making and our personal responsibilities for this. But we also have to stop thinking of the world as divided by nations, 192 or whatever. We have to realize we are collectivity of humanity, and we will die or live together. These weapons will destroy us all, or we will stop them together and build a different kind of peace with the justice and equality that we've all been talking about. And in doing that, we will also absolutely eliminate the rationality and reasons and rights that men take to themselves when they rape, when they threaten, and when they try to destroy active women, just trying to build our communities and to build human future, to try to prevent the world stopping here and going on for our children's future, our children's children, the 7th generation, the 10th generation, the millionth generation, if we can get that far, of people living in peace. Because if we don't stop it here and now in this century, in the next decade, we will be destroyed by the weapons or by our climate destruction. And these are so utterly linked. So let's reorient our heads, recognize we can do all of this because it's all linked. It's not this bit here and that bit there. Thank you all very, very much for your attention. I want you to join me in thanking these wonderful panelists for giving us some very thought-provoking ideas. And now,